Welcome to Mimi Behind the Mic, where healing happens one story at a time. I'm Beth, your host, Mimi to my precious grandchildren. Let's talk about bullying, boundaries, and beliefs, share our experience, strength, and hope, and most importantly, embrace solutions together. Buckle up. The adventure starts now, behind the mic. Ooh. Hi, and welcome to Mimi Behind the Mic. Thank you for being here. Today I have special guests with me, Melissa and Adrienne, a mother and daughter dynamic duo that I met a couple of years ago. And we've reconnected to share this important message about grief. Ladies, thank you for being here. I so appreciate your time and your message. Please tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Well, I am Melissa. I am 56 years old, been married to my husband, the love of my life, for 35 years, and two beautiful children. Adrienne is my oldest, and my son, Dakota, and then we have a beautiful daughter-in-law and two of the cutest grandbabies ever.
I'm Adrienne. I'm her eldest, and I am 33 and an auntie. I've got a great group of friends that have also given me nieces and nephews, and just living life to the fullest.
Love it. Love it. Again, thank you so much for being here. And you are here to talk about grief. So I will just give you the floor. Melissa, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, actually, I think Adrienne may need to start because our grief journey started in 2017 when my niece was killed in a car accident. And she and Adrienne were 8 months apart. So it was like the built-in bestie. They were super de-duper close. So I think to get the full effect of how our journey of grief has come full circle, that we probably need to start with her story and where she came from.
Love it.
Okay, let's see if we can do this. As she said, Mariah and I were 8 months apart. I was 8 months older, and it was always, I turned an age. 8 months later, Mariah turned an age. We were the same age for a few months, and then the cycle started all over again. A lot of my issue in grieving was that I turned 24 July of 2016. We lost her February of 2017, 3 weeks before she was supposed to turn 24. So I never really grasped that that connection was broken. For a long time, I didn't grieve. And people don't understand a lot of times that that's part of the process too. I lost her and I lost part of myself. She was my built-in bestie. She was my OG best friend, the one that was there from practically day one. I was there day one for her. And losing that connection, that person that I constantly text, that I, would call. Her dad would pick me up on his way through on Fridays when he was coming in, and I'd spend the weekend with him. That was up until middle school. We lived around the corner from each other, and having that connection severed. I wouldn't just say losing that connection. It was severed. It was completely cut so suddenly. It was a shock. It was a big change to my life, and it was a big shake to my faith. I lost my faith there for a little bit, especially when I was choosing not to grieve. And I wouldn't say I was ignoring it or I didn't believe that she was really gone. It was just I chose not to deal with it, to just let it sit and kind of fester inside me, because that was easier than facing the problem head on.
Or deal with it unhealthily.
And dealing with it unhealthily, I did there for a while. I had some unhealthy grieving methods, some coping mechanisms, and I have a blog that was one of my first healthy ways to start grieving and to kind of start processing the trauma of it, especially because I was at things like her nephew's birthday parties, and I was at Thanksgiving with our family and she wasn't there. So there was that survivor's guilt that just kind of crushed me. And the only way I could survive that sometimes was through unhealthy methods. And thankfully, I was able to come back to my faith and come back to God. And I was able to break those easily. I wasn't too far gone to still see what I needed to do to get my life back on track,
Thank God
and
for
find
that.
the new normal.
Can we stay there for 1 second? Because I
Sure.
love that you're sharing this trauma, so vulnerable, so transparent. It's a beautiful thing, and I really appreciate you being here. But I would love to stay here for a second for your generation
Mm.
who deals with grief whatever way they do and does go to the unhealthy. It's an incredible blessing that you were able to get out of that kind of quickly, right? And that you had a faith before you experienced this trauma. But I remember seeing how you called her Sunflower, or
Mhm.
Mariah was always the sunflower. Did she love sunflowers? And did
She
that help you?
loved sunflowers. They were her favorite flower. I've got my earrings on.
Okay,
They were her favorite flower, and she had this big picture that was taken in Kansas and that was framed in blue, and my aunt actually, after Mariah passed, my aunt gave me the picture because I started calling
oh,
her Sunflower, and
that's what I remember. And did that
yes,
help
yes,
you when you started honoring her that way?
yes, and I started doing that when I started my blog.
Okay,
My blog is Sunflower Thing, and I can provide that information to you as well if you'd like that later
please,
on. My
please.
blog is sunflower themed, and it's Follow the Sun because that's what sunflowers do.
Oh,
They
heaven
follow
sees. And she
they
followed
follow
the
the
sun.
sun.
Yeah,
Uh,
It's SON. It
yes,
says
SON,
SUN.
there you go.
SUN. The play on the words there too.
Yeah,
And I think my
love that.
actual title is Follow the Sun Like a Sunflower. And her faith was everything to her. So it just kind of seemed fitting. And something I learned after she passed is that sunflowers, when the sun starts setting and the sun starts going away, they turn to each other.
They do. Yep, yep.
Um, and that was something I never knew until after she had passed. But she was my sunflower.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And those unhealthy coping mechanisms, I'll just be honest. I don't mind. I've shared this on my blog, so it's not like it's secret information. It was a drinking problem. I would go home and have a bottle of wine for dinner because I found her favorite bottle of wine at the store, and I would have one glass, and one glass would turn into two, and then I'd be going to bed with an empty bottle, or I'd pick up something on the way home from work, and that was dinner because that was better than going home and crying myself to sleep. But my
How
blog
long,
became,
if I can ask, how long did that last? Your, what you call your unhealthy grieving period.
I wouldn't say I started grieving until probably 2018. I think all of 2017, I was just kind of numb and in denial. Not so much denial, but just that was the letting it fester. And so I would say probably 2 years
Wow.
because I started 2018-ish. Um, and then I started my blog 2020.
Okay.
So I would say it was about 2 years. Now, I will say that I guess about a year and a half because COVID started and I was back on property with my parents. Once COVID started, I had moved back on property just to kind of do that whole quarantine thing here.
Okay.
And I didn't really have the opportunity because I wasn't open about my issue back then.
Okay.
So I didn't have being here with my parents. I didn't have the opportunity to get that way. So I would say about a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Yeah. And another thing that, and I don't even know that she really realizes this, but she really became, if you don't want me to share this, I won't.
You can.
So she really became a hoarder
Okay.
really badly.
With
Her
material
heart,
things?
just, she, well, just,
I couldn't let go of things because I couldn't let go of losing her.
And you could only just a pathway into her apartment, a pathway to a sink piled full of dirty dishes, and a pathway to the bathroom, and a pathway to the bed.
So these were your coping mechanisms at the time, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
basically. And it was a letting go of things. I could not let go anything. And I guess because I wasn't being able to let go of her and the grief and the trauma and that sort of stuff. But I started my blog, and my blog was really the start of grieving, and grieving in a way that was not just healthy, but honored God. I started, those first 2 years, she'd had to drag me to church kicking and screaming. And that was like Christmas, that was Easter, that was, hey, I'm the worship leader and I need someone on the computer running the computer for church. She had to drag me because I couldn't fathom going to church after losing Mariah when she was so faithful.
Why do you think you responded to your mom? Why do you think her dragging you worked?
She didn't have a choice.
There
I want to
was
hear hers. I want to hear hers.
She's right.
I know
There
as a mama bear, but I
was
want to
no
hear.
choice in the matter, and we've always been a close family, and I mean a close family, extended family. Her sisters and my grandparents, and before we lost Mariah, the closeness of our family. So there was that. I wanted to honor her and respect her wishes by going with her, or there would have been that daughter guilt, not the guilt of I'm dishonoring God or I'm not being faithful to God, but it was that earthly feeling of, well, my mom asked me, and even there was a little bit of the survivor guilt. Mariah's not getting to go to church with her mom.
Even in your brokenness, you knew your mom was your safest place, right?
Right. Well, and we had always been close, and Mariah and her mother were very close. And there was always that. We would do things as just girls. Like we did a WinStar trip where we went and spent the night at a hotel, and it was just my mom, her sister, me, and Mariah. And that was actually the August before we lost her. We got to do a trip like that. And so I think there was always that connection there as well. My aunt lost her daughter. My aunt doesn't get to do these things with her daughter, so I felt guilty if I didn't do those things with my mom. Or I didn't allow my mom to get to do those things with her daughter that my aunt no longer can. And God really had his hand in all of this, just from the beginning, even the week leading up to her death. God had his hand in every little piece. I don't want to say preparing us for her death because we didn't know it was coming.
Right.
But we were both preschool teachers at the time. She and I were. And our lunch happened to coincide the day before she passed, that Thursday. And we spent our entire hour lunch break on the phone with each other. And there is some things about that conversation that gave me peace because she was trying to have a baby with her husband. And I knew for a fact the day before she passed, she wasn't pregnant. So there was a piece that I didn't just lose her, but we lost a piece of her because I knew that wasn't a thing. And I know my mom had taken my other cousin out for her birthday, and they had called Mariah. And she had done a game night with my grandparents one night that week with her and her husband. And there were just little things that, looking back on it now, on this side of the grief, that it was preparation.
It was God. Yeah,
Blessings.
It
God
was, he was he had his hands in it. And something she's probably going to talk about a little bit is we don't know the time, we don't know the hour, we don't know the day that God's going to call us home.
right.
For Mariah, it was a car accident. But if she hadn't been driving that morning, I firmly believe that that was God's time to call her home. And as much as we hate that, and as much as earthly I would rather have her here, even with her illnesses and her pains and her medical issues. I'd rather have her here. She couldn't dance anymore, but she's dancing with Jesus now, and the
Amen. Amen.
earthly part of it, I'd rather hear. And that's selfish. It is. But, and something I say on my grief blog a lot is grief's a journey. There's not one straight roadmap for one person to take. And even when you've got it in your sights and you've got your map laid out about, okay, this is what I'm going to do, there's detours, there's roadblocks, there's so many different things. And I say a lot of times, I'm not okay. And that's okay.
Amen.
Know,
Amen. I say
it,
that all the time too. If we let it be okay, God knows it's okay.
yes, yes. So, and I think to transition into her grief journey, she was the one that told me. They showed up to my office, or they showed up at my school, and I was on lunch, and one of the relief ladies that came in to relieve teachers from their classrooms came in to relieve me because the headmaster wanted to talk to me. And he walked me into a room, and I vividly remember walking in, seeing her and my dad standing at the door of this conference room. And I'm thinking, okay, something happened. I knew it wasn't my brother because he was on leave at the time. He was a Marine, but he was on leave in Florida with his friends. So I knew it wasn't anything related to that. My initial thought was grandparents. We'd already lost my dad's mom, but I still had 3 grandparents, and I assumed it was one of them. And then I kind of realized it was more serious than that. Not that losing a grandparent isn't serious, as I would later learn, but I knew that because of the other people in the room, that I was not going to be okay. And this is something I look back on now because for the longest time, I don't remember anything about that day except for her saying Mariah's name and my then supervisor walking into the room. I just kind of blacked out between those 2 moments. But I remember seeing a pastor from our church back behind my parents, a pastor from the church I worked at a private Christian academy, and then my headmaster walking around the table and sitting down and was in the room with me. I remember my mom walking me, sitting me down at a chair, sitting in front of me and saying Mariah's name, and I lost it. I guess I was screaming no so loudly that my director from another part of the building could hear me and went and got my immediate supervisor, who I called my work mom. She was my work mom at the time. And I remember them coming into the room because they could hear me and they knew that it was, and they knew my director had seen Headmaster K. Wood come pull me from my classroom, and they knew something was wrong and they came to check on me. But between Mariah's name and Robin walking in, for the longest time, I don't remember anything. And she has told me since that the look in my eye when she told me will haunt her forever. And I say that to segue into losing my grandfather just a few years ago. So we lost Mariah 2017, and we lost my grandfather in 2023. And I grieved those 2 deaths very differently. I think my loss of faith with Mariah and coming back to God, and what really got me back in church was our current church started a motorcycle Bible study, and that was church for me. On Thursday nights, I would go to our biker church Bible study, and that was church for me. I didn't have to go on Sunday. I got what I needed. And then we moved to a Sunday night second service for the church that we were doing the Bible study through. And then we moved into our own church in 2020. In October of 2020, we became our own independent church. And at that point, I was back in and I was going every Sunday, and I was faithful again, not only to the church, but to God. But it was getting our own service and joining the worship team with Mom and singing again. that really music's always been a huge part of my life. She's very musical and she's always been music driven. So that's just always been something that's been ingrained in me. And I think that was what really joining the worship team and having a reason to sing, that was what brought me back to God and brought me back to my faith. And one of the songs we sing at church is Hallelujah Even Here. And I have it tattooed. Sometimes choosing just to sing is the thing that changes everything.
Amen.
And
Especially when
I
we don't
know,
feel like it, right?
right, exactly. And I know that's what Mariah would have wanted. And for the longest time, saying things like that or hearing what would Mariah want or what would Mariah want you to do made me angry. Like straight up angry. Because, well, if she wanted me to do that, she should be here to tell me. Or you don't know that because she's not here to say it herself.
Was that in your own mind, honey, in your own emotions, or were people speaking that to you?
No, that was all inner turmoil. Her husband and I did have many conversations. Her husband and I, that first year after we lost her, he even told me in a text one day that no one understands like you do because we both lost our best friend. He and I got close because he could say something and it was exactly what I was thinking. And I
Wow.
just didn't have anyone I wanted to voice that to. And a lot of it, I didn't want to voice it because that made it real.
And how long was she with her husband?
So
That's a beautiful story, by the way.
Yeah.
That's another God thing.
it's another God thing.
Incredible.
They met at church camp in high school.
Oh, I remember that. Yes.
Yes. They met at church camp in high school, and she had been in some rocky relationships. And April of that year, she had decided that she was not going to focus on boys or relationships. She was going to focus on herself and on God. Well, she met him that July at church, and he was just fine being her friend. They met at church camp up in Denton, or up north near Denton, I think, and he was just fine being her friend. Now, granted, he lived in Cumbie, Texas, and she lived in Morgan Mill, Texas, hours from each other. So they would talk on the phone just as friends. It was nothing romantic.
And they were both campers? They weren't counselors or anything?
No. They were both in high school, same grade. They were actually, Brady's birthday is actually the week before hers. He was only a week older than her.
Wow.
So he waited the whole year, and when her year was up, his parents drove him all the way to Morgan Mill, Texas, so that he could bring her flowers and officially ask her to be his girlfriend. Because he had waited so long. So they had more years than they could have had together. They were together
8 years.
years total, I think, and 3 of those, they had just celebrated their 3rd wedding anniversary when she passed.
Wow. And it sounds like your love for her and his love for her, you bond, both of your bonds with her, and both of your grieving processes with her are so similar. You and
Well,
him are like similar souls, maybe?
he
Is that right?
was actually at seminary
Okay.
when she passed. I mean, he did later go back and finish his degree and things like that. But mission and loving people and loving God, that was that mission. That was her whole life. I mean, she had, for a while, was the children's pastor at her church, and she would have been the perfect pastor's wife. Her love for people and her love for Jesus, it was just, it shone in everything she did.
Yeah.
And I think part of that's why I lost my faith so hard.
Yeah.
Is how could this person that literally dedicated her whole life, her whole marriage, everything to the service of him, just to be ripped away from that service and that mission. And something we learned after her passing, her Facebook about me said that she wanted to go to heaven and take as many people with her as possible. That was her goal. So I think as hard as I grieved her and as steady as my mother was for me in my grief, She was my rock. She was sometimes the only thing keeping me afloat. And I think to see the roles reversed, and I know she's going to talk about that. I'll let her talk about that. But seeing those roles reversed, I think really put a lot of it into perspective for us. And I'm very conscious these days, since losing Mariah and starting to grieve healthily, I'm very conscious on what I say to grieving people. I do not tell grieving people that I'm sorry for their loss. You will never catch those words coming out of my mouth. Or if it's someone on a Facebook post or something, you will never catch me saying, I'm sorry for your loss, because no one is sorrier for that loss than the person you're talking to. And people saying, I'm so sorry you lost her, I'm so sorry for your loss. It was another thing that angered me. In the early days of my grieving, it was something that, yeah, well, me too.
You were angry? Do you feel like you were very angry?
I do. And a lot of the anger really had no place to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say I was angry at God. I lost my faith. But I think my anger just didn't have a place to go. So when someone would say something like, I'm so sorry for your loss, or even what would Mariah want, or would she be proud of you for that decision, or things like that, like, well, no, she wouldn't be, but she's not here, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
And I wasn't angry at her because she was gone. Uh, but I had all this anger, and I think a lot of that was the just festering, that not grieving, not trying to move forward, not move on, but move forward with my life, because this is not something I will ever move on from. I will
Right.
grieve her until the day I die,
Right.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I didn't find a way to move forward, to accept that this was my new normal. This was life as I know it now. Because life as I knew it then was never coming back.
There's
Right.
time before the loved one
Mhm.
dies, and then time starts over
Yeah.
after the loved one dies. And you have, well, before then and after then. It's two
Right.
different times.
And I'm thankful. My best friend now, she knew me before Mariah because we worked together. And she's seen me change and grow and move forward. And she picks up on the little things. And if, like, on Mariah's anniversary day or her birthday or something like that, she'll text me, how are you doing? Just to check in on me, get my mood, that sort of thing. And if I say I'm fine or I'm okay or something, she knows based on the tone of the text if I am. And she knows based on the tone of the text what I might need. Do I need her to push? Do I need her to just let it be and let me feel my emotions? And I will say I've done better the first 5 years. If it fell on a work day, I called out.
Okay.
I didn't call out. I put PTO in because I know it was coming. February in general is such a bittersweet month for me. I have one nephew with a birthday. My baby cousin, Jaylee, has her birthday, but that's the month we lost her. So it's always a very bittersweet month for me. And even to this day, I make sure I'm not alone on that day because that is very triggering. I sent her a text that morning that never got answered because if you look at the timestamps, she was already gone before I sent it. I just didn't know it yet.
Okay. So, Adrienne, today you mentioned a few things that speak to me as your progress in your grief. Do you acknowledge that progress?
I do. And
Okay.
that took me a long time. Because again, there was that guilt and acknowledging that I've moved forward sometimes felt like a disservice to her because I was living life without her. And I was okay living life without her. Not okay, but okay.
Yeah.
Once I started healthily grieving. Um, and I don't think I really acknowledged how far I had come in my grief until we lost my grandfather. And I grieved the two very differently. Um, very differently. Um, Losing a grandparent is never easy. But I was more at peace with his death than I was Mariah's, because circle of life.
Okay.
We're born, we grow up, we lose our grandparents, we lose our parents and aunts and uncles in that generation, and then we're supposed to start losing our generation.
Yeah.
And losing Mariah so young, that, I mean, it was so sudden, it was not, I mean, Mariah and I had plans. We were gonna
I'm
be the
sure you
two
did. Yeah.
we were gonna be the two old biddies in the nursing home that made our husbands share a room with us because we
There
were
you
sharing a
go.
room.
There you go.
And she was gonna have her hot pink scooter, I was gonna have my neon orange scooter, and we were just gonna cause havoc.
I can see
And
it.
and for sure, that was letting go of those things was not something I thought I would ever have to do. You know, I'm supposed to lose my grandparents first, and then I'm supposed to lose my parents. And while they stink and you don't want,
Right.
that's the order of life. That is how things are supposed to go. And I was more at peace. And I think a lot of the healing and the loss of faith, even that I experienced, I think helped me not prepare for my grandfather's death, but once it was here, to handle it better and healthier and in a way that glorified God, not turned away from him. There was always the I knew I was going to lose my grandfather, and I always, at least I shouldn't speak for her, I always assumed that he would go first because he was a 5-time, 6-time cancer survivor.
Well,
So it was just one of those things where every cancer diagnosis was, is this going to be the one? And there's a piece for me in the fact that that's not how he died.
okay.
And I think even though we lost both Mariah and my grandfather in an accident, um, Mariah's was a car accident, my grandfather's was a tractor accident. I think that for me, not watching him suffer because of chemo, because of, cancer drugs, because of the cancer eating away at his body, for me, the way he passed was the better option. Because he was out on his land, he was doing what he loved. He loved that stupid tractor. He loved working that land. That was he loved his girls, his 3 daughters, he loved his grandkids and his boys, as he called his son-in-laws. But he loved that land. And he was constantly thanking God for providing him that land and for providing him the opportunity to get to do what he loves. He was just an old cowboy. Lainey Wilson, this year for his anniversary of his death, Lainey Wilson has a song called Call a Cowboy. And
Mm.
those are the lyrics I used to honor him on that day, or maybe it was his
Aw.
birthday. I don't remember. In my post on Facebook, because that was my grandfather. And so the two grief journeys for me have been so disconnected. I mean, there's some crossover because it was mine and Mariah's grandfather. It
Okay.
wasn't it was our common grandfather that I lost. So there was some crossover, but the 2 journeys are I mean, those are intersections. They are still 2 very separate journeys for me.
Your
Parallel.
emotions were very different with both.
Yes, yes. I grieved my grandfather as a daughter watching her mother grieve her daddy. Um, Whereas Mariah, I was so I don't wanna say self-centered in my grief. I guess self-centered is the better word, but I was selfish in my grief.
Okay.
I didn't I would think about Brady and his grief occasionally, especially when he and I were texting. I would think about my aunt and uncle, especially if I was going to do something with my parents that, there was that guilt there. Um, and I do remember the one person I wanted to see after hugging my mama and my daddy, after learning about it, was my uncle. I
Mariah,
wanted to
what?
see my Uncle Don.
Is that Mariah's father?
That was her daddy. Um, and my Uncle Don and we've always been close as well. And I hugged my mama, my daddy. I remember his arm being on my shoulder as mom told me, um, when I broke down. But after hugging and loving on my mama and daddy, the whole ride out to Morgan Mill from Fort Worth, I wanted my Uncle Don. Uh,
Great segue.
I don't remember when my grandfather passed. I think I just jumped so quick into caretaker mode
For your mom.
for my mom and my aunts and my grandmother, and my cousins and my brother. My brother had a 6-day-old baby. Um, I think I jumped so quick into caretaker mode that I didn't, because I was at peace, I could
Right.
jump into that caretaker mode. And even my drive to the hospital, I was on the phone with my baby cousin Jaylee. I was on the phone with my cousin Tamra. And then we got there and the chaplain's like, "Well, we need a contact person." That's me. My brother was already there, but like I said, his oldest son was with his in-laws, and my sister-in-law and him were there with the 6-day-old because she couldn't leave him. And I was like, "That's me. I mean, I'll be the contact." My grandmother is 2.5 hours away. Like,
Hmm.
they're coming, but she's not here yet. And I just kind of jumped in. And so anything, we need some information on him. Well, thankfully, I knew most of the information they needed, like date of birth and next of kin. And, I knew all of that information. So it was just that natural. So I'd already been in that role. And then we found out we lost him. And I knew before we lost him that he was gone. Or before, I guess I shouldn't say before we lost him. I knew before the words came out of my daddy's mouth and announced it to us that he was gone. And I know she's going to talk more about this, but when she talks about the look in my eyes, when she told me about Mariah, when my dad stepped out of the room where my mom and my aunts and my uncles and my dad and my grandmother were, where they were finding out the news from the chaplain and the nurses, my dad opened the door and I could hear her screaming. That was when I knew. I didn't have to be told. I didn't have to have the words out of anybody's mouth to confirm what I already knew. And I always thought it was odd because when she told me about Mariah, it was instant tears, it was instant screaming, it was, no, 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 no. But there were no tears. Um, right off the bat when I lost my grandfather. I did cry later that night. My baby cousin and I drove home from the hospital together. We came out here to take care of my parents' dogs because, of course, my mom went back to my grandparents' ranch. So there were tears, but that really solidified in my mind the progress. You had mentioned, you'd asked me about recognizing and acknowledging the progress in my grief. That was really and truly the moment I knew that while this wound would always bleed after losing Mariah,
You really were okay.
I really was okay.
You
And
were
I really
armored.
was.
God armored you.
Yes, I
This story is
was
incredible.
prepared emotionally, and I was prepared faithfully for this loss. Even though they're different losses, I was prepared to handle what I needed to handle with my grandfather's loss because I had been shattered. I'd been broken, to a point where I thought it was beyond repair. He didn't think that, but I did.
Exactly. He
Um,
put you back
and I've been
together.
Yeah, and I've been able to use that grief, and my journey to help others.
Mhm.
Um, I have a friend that lost her mom almost a year ago, and when I heard the news, my first prayer was, "God, don't let her be like me." Because I was so broken, and the only person that could put the pieces together here on earth was me, with his help. And so my first prayer was, give her whatever she needs now to not end up like me. And she and I are very close now. She would call me when she was angry about her mom's death. We were work friends. We worked together up until just recently. She would snag me in the break room. And I was able to kind of, not help her process her grief, but talk her through, it's okay to feel what you're feeling.
Yeah.
You have every right. It's human nature to feel mad, to feel sad, to feel, in denial. And I've been able to really, over the last almost year, take everything I learned and take my growth and take my experience, walk that path with her and hold her hand, um and I think that's been another healing, another stitch in the wound for me, is to see that maybe I lost Mariah for a reason. Because for the longest time, and there are still some days, I don't know why. And I want to know why.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would help, but I don't know that it would hurt either. But I want to know why. And on days that I talk to my friend, I can kind of get a glimpse of maybe why Mariah had to be taken. Because who have I been able to help? Who's read my blog? Because I am very honest in my blog. I think one of my opening lines is, I love Jesus, but I do cuss a little. Because I am very open and I'm very raw. And the first one I shared, I said, I'm using this as a way for me to grieve, as a way for me to find a healthy avenue for my grief, to move forward, not on. And when I shared it on Facebook, I said, sharing this in case it helps someone else, because I didn't start it for that reason. I started it for me. But God was just kind of nudging me that maybe I needed to share this with someone else. And music is a big part of my life, so all of the titles of my blog are music quotes, and the credits for the song down at the bottom. Some are Christian, some are country, some are random. If I hear a song that fits a mood, I'll do a draft, and then later on I'll go, oh, that's perfect, I'm feeling this today, and I'll pull that draft up from a year ago with that song title on it, or that lyric, and pull it forward. And that was just my way of grieving. That was my healthy avenue. And I don't post as much anymore because I do think I'm on the healed side of things. It'll always be a wound that reopens, because it's a scar, and sometimes scars just pulse. But to answer your question, I do acknowledge my healing, and I do see on this side of the line, he is faithful in all things. And actually I pulled it up. I have tattooed on my thigh, I have a giant sunflower dream catcher tattoo that the very last, I guess it was the last week or two that Mariah was alive, Mariah had a lot of anxiety. And one night she woke up in a panic and had a panic attack. Her husband had to go to school the next morning, and she didn't want to bother him. So she texted me, and I sent her a meme of a sunflower dream catcher, and it had Psalms 61:2 on it. From the end of the earth I call to you when my heart is faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And it had the lead me to the rock that is higher than I on the picture. So I have Psalm 61:2 on my sunflower dream catcher tattoo. It's a beautiful piece. And then there are petals that are falling off the catcher, and it's got her initials in those petals that are falling. And then it's all in her handwriting. The Psalm 61:2 and her initials are in her handwriting. That's kind of been, I don't want to say my verse, but lead me to a rock that is higher than I, because there were some days that I was drowning and I needed that high rock.
Amen. Amen. We
So
all do. We all do. Beautiful, beautiful story / testimony. And again, I know the world needs to hear this. I know your generation and the younger generation coming up behind you definitely needs to hear how such trauma and brokenness can heal. And everybody does have their own path, but God is above it all, and God's hand is in it all.
for sure.
And I so appreciate you sharing.